Hello, hello. Happy Monday, everyone out there. Happy to see you for another Money Monday today. We have Ashley with us today, which is very exciting. We're going to be talking about passing on properties and possessions and really the importance of having your wishes be known. So it's all good stuff. We're excited. Everyone's jumping in. Anyone new tuning in today? My name is Maggie and I'm a partner at Purse Strings. We're all about providing financial education, just like this, some straightforward information to become a little bit more knowledgeable. But when you need a professional to go to put things in transition or transaction, we have top tier financial professionals who love to serve the female market. We call those our Purse Strings approved professionals, and Ashley is one of them. So we're so excited to have you on here today. Before we get started, Ashley, could you just give a little intro about yourself so people know who you are?
Yeah, so I am a financial professional with Hammack Advisory Group. I'm actually in the Southeast Missouri area, and my focus really is on women and small business retirement plans. That's kind of my focus right now. I've been licensed since about 2018 and was in personal financial education prior to that. So my heart, my passion is really for, educating people. And so I'm very excited to be here today with you.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. This is all education, so you should have a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm really interested in this because it's something that I don't know as much about. So I think it should be really interesting. So we're going to be talking about passing on personal possessions and the importance of making your wishes known. And we kind of talked about this, and you started with, possessions, and you said untitled. And so we're just going to dive right in and talk about titled and untitled. Mm-hmm. What is that? I mean, how are they not all possessions?
Right. Right. So let me just start by saying, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to be giving any specific advice here. And I do suggest, if you're kind of starting this estate planning process, to seek out a trusted professional. But when we're talking titled and untitled property, titled property is really anything that has a legal transfer document associated with it. So we're talking about, you have a house, and on the house you put a beneficiary deed for your heirs. Or if you have an automobile, like a transfer on death or a TOD, bank accounts, like a payable on death or a POD. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about really when we're talking about titled property. But today I really wanted the focus to be on untitled property. And untitled property, or personal possessions, are really important to discuss because a lot of times this is what causes infighting and upheaval when someone passes away. So these are things like grandma's jewelry, or guns, quilts, family heirlooms, photos, maybe some books that have been in the family a long time, furniture, cookware, anything that someone has in their house that's a personal possession that just does not have some type of paperwork to transfer that property on.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like these are a lot of items that the worth might be a little bit more important to you versus actually having a lot of money worth to it.
Right.
There might also be a lot of value monetarily, but it has a lot of value to someone just because it's, a family heirloom or a memory or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So most of the time it's items that have sentimental value, but there may be a piece of jewelry or some type of artwork or something that does have a little bit more monetary value. And so, just kind of deciding who that piece goes to when passing that on is something to be thinking about while you're still alive.
So how do you go about properly transferring these to the next person?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can pass on your personal property. And one of those ways is just to really write down a list. And we call this creating a list. You can, kind of attach it to your will once you create your will, and, be able to refer to it. And this is just saying, I want my grandmother's quilts to go to this person. I want my guns to go to this person. I want these, antique pie plates or whatever to go to this person, and just creating that list and making sure when you draft your will that you are referring to that list in your will. It's just part of that process. But if you're not really looking to go that in depth, There are some other things you can do, like gifting it now. So just for instance, my grandma had a jewelry box when I was a kid, and I loved organizing it and, moving the jewelry around, putting the jewelry on. And she knew that I loved that specific item. So when I had my first baby, she just went ahead and gifted that item to me.
Oh.
And so that was like a good emotional moment and a good bonding experience for us. The only thing I would say about, gifting now is there are no take backs. So once you gift that item, just know that that item is going to stay with that person. And then the other one I wanted to mention is just like being able to like label items. So if you have certain items in your home and you want it to go to a specific person, maybe putting some type of, at least like semi-permanent label on there of who that, you want that item to go to, or a note with it. The only issues with that is sometimes the label or the note can get lost.
Yeah.
Or, maybe you didn't communicate to that person that you want it or that you want to give it to them. And I think that's part of it too. Like communication's key here. So if you're saying like, I want, my granddaughter to have this cookie jar, putting the label on it with her name, and then also making it known that, little Sophie gets this cookie jar. So you want to make sure not only in that labeling process or the gifting it now process that you're having those conversations with like your friends and your family.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. And gifting now seems like it could be a lot of fun, seeing the joy that it brings you and kind of share that experience, but I could also see people like, well, it's the ring I wear every day. I don't want to give that away yet because I still wear it every day.
Yeah. It can be an emotional experience. And like in my instance, when my grandma gave me that jewelry box at my baby shower, like I teared up. I was very emotional about it. But at the same time, she knew that I was getting it, that I was going to take care of it, and that it was going to remain in the family, because I have little girls too that'll want to, play with those items and organize the jewelry box. So it just, there's some thought that needs to go into it. If it's like bigger things that you really want to make sure are included, I would create the list and refer to that list within your will, or, give those items now, but just make sure that you're ready.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember when my grandma passed away, my mom is one of 13. And so there was like a ton of jewelry, and each piece of jewelry like had a specific person to go to, whether that was maybe their birthstone or, they were the oldest. So they got the one that had, all 13 kids' birthstones or whatever it may be. But I remember it was a very drawn out list for each item to make sure somebody got something, which part of that could be, the value, being fair versus equal. That can be hard, especially with the family, and we don't want any fights to start later. Like, do you have any advice around that?
Yeah. So there's a difference between being fair and being equal. So if you said, I'm going to be equal no matter what I do with passing on my possessions, what you're trying to do is say, like, if I have 2 children, I'm going to give 50-50, 50-50 to each of them. And that might be based on the dollar value of items, or, maybe you have 2 pieces of furniture and you say, you get this piece of furniture and you get this piece of furniture. So you can split it that way. That's a little bit more easily done with like financial types of assets, splitting the 50-50. But if you, are really concerned about value, you could have things appraised, especially like jewelry and those kinds of things, if you wanted to go that route. But then you can also think about it in the fair way. Like if you're just worried more about being fair, that might mean that, maybe you do have 2 children, but you also have a friend who took care of you while you were sick or something like that. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be an equal value. It's whatever feels comfortable to you. These are your items. These have been passed down to you, or you've been able to collect them. So the most important thing is to do what feels right to you.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And, sometimes you'd think, if you had 4 other brothers, none of them are going to want the jewelry box probably, and so if she had 2 jewelry boxes, she might give them both to you anyways, because all the boys had boys. I don't know. And so it's just like, you would get better use out of it with your girls and things like that.
Correct. Yes, for sure. And we've had instances too, or I've seen instances where, there are 3 kids and one is dealing with some like personal life issues. And they just aren't ready to, divvy up that property to them yet. And so there's just going to be, everybody's living in different life circumstances. And so you just kind of really have to think about what's best for you and what makes you most comfortable.
Do you have, are there any like certain items that people tend to always forget about that you're like, we should make sure that this gets on the list if you have them?
I think there are some things. The first thing would be pets.
Oh, that's a smart one.
Of
Yeah.
all things, because grandma has this cute little like white fluffy dog. Like, what's going to happen to the dog if something happens to grandma? And not everybody wants a dog, right? So, thinking about things like pets, family photos, because a lot of times, back in the day before we had, all this digital stuff, there was only one photo, right? So, kind of figuring out who those items might need to go to or who might want them. I mean, there's probably going to be some folks in your family who may not want a piece of antique furniture, or who may not want, like a box full of pictures to go through.
Please don't give that to me.
Right. So I think it's important to, know your audience, who you're giving to, and give those items to people who are going to appreciate them in the long term. But yeah, it's a difficult process to go through, but I think it's something that everybody needs to think about for sure.
Yeah, and really overall, I mean, this is a conversation about death.
Right.
It is a conversation about someone dying. It's important, but do you have tips on having these conversations or how to start them, or I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, almost all of us, I feel like, have dealt with some kind of personal experience when it comes to an estate plan. We have a friend or family member who's gone through a difficult situation with the way things were split up at the end. And I mean, I've heard a lot of stories where people are still like emotionally hurt from, someone receiving this book and they didn't. And so I think it's important to just really communicate with your heirs about what you're going to do, and then not be afraid to have that conversation, because 100% of us are going to die, right? Like 100% of us. So I think it's just important to have that conversation. Like, hey, I had a friend who recently just passed away, and her children are really dealing with, a lot of upheaval because she didn't leave a will behind that says what she wanted to do with all her stuff. So I'm going to take that step moving forward with you guys and really explain to you, what my plan is when I'm gone. And the big thing to remember, I think, and I'm in Missouri and I don't know how all states work, but if you don't decide something, the state will decide for you. And, there is a chance that your things could go to auction or, some other process like that. So in order to avoid those things that you don't maybe want to happen, it's important to plan ahead, for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so how do you know what items to put on the list versus not?
Right.
Because I feel like, after a while, it's like, I'm not going to go book by book, item by item and separate them. So how do you kind of go about doing that?
Right. In a lot of instances, there have probably been conversations about certain items within a family or within a household that have come up probably more than once, like a prize piece of furniture or something like that. So you probably know or have an idea of some general things that you might own that someone else is interested in. Right. And you can also ask, your heirs or your kids or your friends or whoever that you're maybe wanting to give these items to, are you interested in having these items? If I pass them on to you, I'm considering leaving them to you. Are you interested in having them? So just having that open conversation about that, I think, is going to be really important. And, really, I feel like I wouldn't be doing you all justice if I didn't say, it's very important to have a will in place minimally for, the things that you own, your assets. And when I set up my will back in like 2019, I went through an attorney and it was probably around $300 to set that up. Depending on where you live geographically, it may cost more or less. But I do think it's important to at least maybe like schedule to take that first step. If you've been thinking about it, today's a great day. Just call up your trusted professional and say, hey, I just want to come in and talk to you about my estate plan and setting up a will. And then you can discuss, it's their job to take you through the questions of, well, if you have younger kids, who would you like the child care to be for those children? And if you have items you want to list in your will, like the list of personal items, include that, your healthcare directives, those kinds of things. So very, very important. And then also, I've heard a lot about online services, just as an example, like LegalZoom, those kinds of things. Those, like, just looking at the pricing on that, it ranges from $89 from just the will up to like $250 for an estate package. So it's not extremely expensive to be working on making these plans for yourself and for your family, and just be taking that next step.
Right. And, it takes the stress out of your family later, because otherwise it all goes to court,
Right.
which is a lot of legal fees, a lot of time, a lot of everything that you don't want to deal with when someone you love has just passed away.
Right.
So it's not, yes, you'll be gone. You don't have to deal with it. And so why spend your money now? But it's just such a gift to your family and a sigh of relief. That's one less thing they have to do, or go through or be drawn out in this process, because it is very emotional. And so you don't want to be caught up, having to go to court just to get the cash, or the money that she had, when she could have just paid $300 and really taken care of it.
Right. Right. Just making a small investment now, in your future.
Yep.
And, we do that in a lot of ways already. I think people are scared of like the time commitment it might take, out of their day to go meet with someone. But, generally the attorneys kind of pretty much already have like a template set up, and all they're doing is just asking you those personal questions that they feel is going to be relevant, to your life moving forward. So it's kind of already set up. It doesn't take like an extreme amount of time to do. And then also, once you have that in place, you can either create your list, or you can just start having those conversations, with your kids, your grandkids, your friends, and say, like, I'm on this journey to complete my estate plan. This is very important to me. I have these items. What are you interested in? And there are probably some people who are going to be surprised. Like you may have a kid who's like, hey, there's just like this princess book you used to read to me when I was a kid, and I know it's still there. I'd like to have it. And that may have not been something that you necessarily thought that they would want,
Right.
But you could either go ahead and gift it to them at that time, or make a note in it for future.
You never know what impressions on the childhood or something that, this random item took that you didn't quite know about, which is really exciting. You never know what people might really are interested in, but there's also those things like, I thought you would want this forever couch. And it's like,
Right.
No, Mom, I actually don't.
Right.
Thank you though.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do live in a little bit different, generation now. And I think, we're losing a little bit of, some of those, like the family reunions and those kinds of things. So I think there's been a little bit of loss in touch in some of those areas. And this is kind of a way to say like, hey, when you were a kid, we used to read these books together. Do you have any interest in having these? Or we used to listen, to records on this record player. Do you want it? And they may be like, no way.
I'd be like a working record player. Hook me up.
Right. I do not want any more clutter. I'm like a minimalist. And that's fine. At least and then that's not an item that you would have to worry about. It can, go to auction, or somebody can give it away after you're gone, and it's not a big deal. So.
Right. And so a lot of this you would do with an attorney. And
Right.
We started with that you are not an attorney.
Right.
Why is this such a passionate thing for you to talk about, or such an important piece in the process?
Yeah, I've just known a lot of family and friends who have dealt with these situations where it's really caused some deep issues in the family. And it's not on the titled stuff, because when you say, well, you're going to be the beneficiary of this house, here's the paperwork. It's very simple. It moves through the courts easily, or it doesn't even have to go to the courts usually. So it just moves very easily in that direction. But I think what happens with some of these personal items is there are miscommunications. And just as an example, I was at my mother-in-law's house, and, one of her grandkids was there, and she has all of these cookie jars, like up in her kitchen, like along the top, like kitty cat, like cookie jars and all these kinds of things. And she asked her, she's like, do you remember which one that I was going to leave for you? And the little, the granddaughter was like, no, I don't remember. And so I think that there was like a little bit of hurt feelings there, to some extent, but also, if she would have passed away before mentioning which one it was, and hadn't labeled it or anything like that, she wouldn't know that it was going to who she wanted it to go to. So just something to keep in mind and, focus on doing moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And it is important stuff because it is those little things or the things that are really at the end of the day, almost priceless.
Right.
And so that makes a lot of sense that you want those wishes to be known and shared and respected for sure.
Definitely.
And so if, someone watching this today wanted to work with you, what kind of services do you provide?
Well, I actually do quite a bit. My focus is really on like investments management. And I have done a lot of like Medicare counseling in the past. So if someone had Medicare questions, that's kind of one of my knowledge areas. And then I also work a lot with small business retirement plans. So I'm working a lot in like the simple IRA, 401k space. So those are really like my comfort areas. But I definitely have passions in a lot of different things. So if somebody's interested in reaching out to me, or if they have questions about the presentation or anything, it looks like my contact information is kind of scrolling around the bottom. So definitely feel free to reach out. Even if you just want to network, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation, one that we don't talk about enough. Because we always talk about, the big ticket items or just the bank account itself. But these little things can really scramble up the family, which is not what we're looking for. And so I'm glad that we had this conversation of really how to properly hand over these items or hand over your wishes to your loved ones and your friends and family. What's the best way should they email you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I would say email is the best way to contact me. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can just search for Ashley Bales on LinkedIn, and definitely be happy to connect either way with you.
Awesome. She's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can check her out on our site, pursestrings.co. Yeah, is there any other thing we missed?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers it. I hope everyone, kind of just takes a few minutes, maybe at the end of the day today, to kind of go home and just do a walkthrough of your house and consider all of the items that you have in there. Maybe start making your list. Next time you're touching base with family, just let them know that's what you're working on. Maybe not a conversation over Thanksgiving dinner, but just kind of start that process and move forward with it. And, hopefully you'll get something going.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on today and having this wonderful conversation. And we'll talk to everyone again. Well, not next Monday because it's Memorial Day weekend. So another Monday after that. Talk to everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank you.